Hello and welcome to This Contains Garlic. You are here with your hosts Georgia Garlic and
Mark Garlic.
and we are back for episode 11.
Big one today.
Is it a big one?
It is a big one today. It's going to be deep.
No, it's not. We're just going to be talking about emotional eating. We're both currently sat, not to be sexual, half naked, sweating because we have to close the doors whenever we record this because
We're under the flight path, so we have to keep the doors closed. Otherwise, you hear the aeroplanes screeching overhead.
yeah, it's really annoying actually. If you live in southwest London, you'll understand when you literally live under the flight path. You don't ever take that into consideration until you live there. So yeah, we've closed the doors. There's no fan on because obviously
I feel like it's a very British thing to discuss the weather first thing into like any form of conversation. So here we are.
So what do you think an
talking about
African
the
thing
weather.
is to often bring up? The fact you don't have electricity?
Corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah, no electricity,
No
no
electricity.
running water, no public services, no
Okay, well you don't live in
healthcare,
Africa now, so we're back here
crime
sweating.
rates.
Sweating, about to record a podcast for you on emotional eating. So I think first things first, emotional eating, before we get into what it is and how we can advise and help on this, it's very important to understand that this is all very individual context. Everything is down to effectively the person in which you're dealing with. It is not a generic statement, it's not, if you do this, you're never going to emotionally eat again. But also before we start on this, it's really important to understand that emotional eating is a really totally normal human go-to.
Like a normal response to certain situations, and like Georgia said, it depends on the person, and it's very nuanced, and each person is triggered by different things, and each person copes with stress and or
Emotions.
life or emotions in general with different ways. So I think what we want to kind of discuss is going over the different types of emotional eating, and then different scenarios maybe of where it can arise and how to deal with it, and just the general mindset behind
Emotional eating. But I think also before we actually go into emotional eating, there is a very big difference between emotional eating and binge eating. Now, as many people do class them under the same thing, they are not factually the same thing in any way, shape or form. And just to give you a little background of what binge eating is associated with, normally it's about 3 of the following points, which is eating more, much more rapidly than normal. So eating your food very, very quickly, not being considerate about chewing and just eating it. Eating until feeling very uncomfortably full. Now, there is a difference between
going past the point of being satisfied and just like
eating for the sake of eating.
Eating for the sake of eating,
And then being to the point where
you feel sick.
you feel sick, or other things arise. Another one could be that eating large amounts of food when you're not actually physically hungry. So that's a very,
Basically 9 out of 10 of these things happen to me on a daily basis.
not a daily basis. I think actually, whilst we just get to the end of this, there's another 2 points of binge eating. Now, again, a lot of these things, as I just like to say, do work potentially in conjunction with other obsessive behaviours or abusive behaviours to a body. But sometimes eating alone because you're embarrassed about how much you are consuming, and also feeling like disgusted with yourself potentially, or guilt or depressed for overeating. But as we've said, time and time again, we ourselves have probably I went through a large binge eating phase in my childhood into teenage years, and I would say, I'm not going to speak for you, Mark, but I wouldn't say you didn't have access to that much food in Zimbabwe. You've probably post show, maybe post a bodybuilding competition, you probably may have gone off maybe not. I don't know.
I think it's the dialing in your nutrition for 20 odd weeks. Some people do it for 12. I used to do it for 20, taking the slower, more measured approach. And obviously, as you get more and more depleted and your body fat goes into single digits, your food focus goes through the roof. You're essentially doing the complete opposite of what your body wants to do.
But I think if you are an athlete in that situation and you are going into a situation like that, then you need to understand the mental and physical I guess, drawbacks to
But yeah, you become
competing.
very, very food
But
focused and very, just drawn and hungry. So there is always going to be some element of emotional eating
not binge
once
eating as
you.
necessarily as such. But we do know a lot of
I
people that
mean,
have.
you could classify it as binge eating after in bodybuilding terms when you just go and you absolutely go
Yeah, but that's
mental.
not binge eating the terms of the fact that
No.
binge eating, you need to repeat, you need to repeat these aspects
Yeah,
for normally about at least 1 day a week for like 3 months plus
Yeah, I
to,
would say it's very common then for binge eating to occur post show.
yes. And a lot of people, as we
Yeah,
said, if
and
you
it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just your body's natural homeostatic response to trying to claw back calories and body fat.
I would say it's actually quite a bad thing for that to happen. And I think that if you're prepared going into a show, then you are less likely to necessarily do this. But does come down to emotional circumstances. There's plenty of people binge eat due to grief or other external emotions. And I think when it comes to competing, there is a difference,
Yeah, there's a difference. We need to separate the two completely from each other because one is self-induced almost, and then the other one's like grief or
You're choosing to put yourself in
you're
a
choosing
very.
to go through that, and
The other one is a body response, shall you say, to an emotion of
like
some
an
degree.
external factor like what's going on in life or.
But I think if you feel like potentially you look not as we're going to go on to emotional eating, and you probably will see some similarities that people can, as I said at the start, class the two under the same bracket. There are very different things, and we would always advise that. We've dealt with many clients that have had different disorders in the sense of eating disorders, and we've taken them through that approach. But if you are in a way where you feel like you're completely out of control, then the best way forward for binge eating disorder is to speak to a professional therapist, and to actually speak through those triggers as to why it is happening and how you can manage it. Emotional eating is, as we said, a slightly different thing.
Thing is, like we've had this discussion prior to the podcast, and Georgia brought up a very valid point about the fact that we're always, to a certain degree, in a state of some form of emotion, whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, you fill in the blank spot. So essentially we are always emotionally eating in a sense because we're always emotional depending on whatever scale. So it's like heightened emotions or situations that are not normal, and the coping mechanisms around
I think
the thought process and your food choices.
So I think, like, if we were like with emotional eating, obviously what it's actually defined as is eating in response to negative emotions, like, as Mark said, it could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be fear, it could be a number of different options, but that both positive and negative emotions have always been linked to increased eating.
Yeah.
So, we could
celebrations, feasting.
Yeah, like you'll always have subconscious sort of memories or experiences where you effectively like linked maybe a happy moment in your life to a food.
Birthday cake.
Okay, Mark. Like we give the example, potentially you've gone on a family holiday as a child and you have fond memories of getting an ice cream with your parents by the seaside, and then you maybe think back to the time you had ice cream, and that subconsciously is, as we always say, in your life, because you've then resonated with X food for X reason.
X scenario situation.
But I guess like, it can always be argued that, like, as we said, emotional eating is like what we do on a daily basis. We're always running with some kind of emotion at the end of the day. But I think where we tend to mean by actual emotional eating is an increase or change in eating to response to a certain emotion. So, for example, maybe somebody passes away in your family or somebody you're close to, or potentially you're being bullied at school or throughout your childhood. Like, for example, going back, the reason I started with binge eating disorder was because I was really badly bullied. And my response to that was to eat, but eat alone and always hide anything that I had eaten. So if it was wrappers and, my mum's probably listening to this right now. She'll probably start crying. No, because she'll probably get quite emotional about it. Because I think when a child is being bullied
Why
at school.
did you buy it in the first place, Jane?
No, she didn't buy it. I went out of my way to buy it myself. Oh my
Okay.
God.
Well, very independent.
Very independent. No, I mean, it happened in a time where, when a child gets given pocket money, potentially a couple of pounds a week, or you've earned it through chores. You never did a fucking chore, Mark, because you were lazy.
I used to work for my father actually when I was 16 on the forecourt changing tyres, Georgia.
How long did that last? 1 week.
6 months.
Anyway, so I used to buy food, or I used to sort of get it from anywhere. I'd even get it, potentially I'd get it from the cupboards without my parents' permission as such. But I want to go on to that in the sense of parental, guidance with food.
Lock the cupboard.
No,
like
Mark,
my
you're
mum
not
did.
talking any sense. We can't listen to you. I'm very oblivious to a lot of things.
My mother
clearly.
used to lock the cupboard. Put it that
Yeah, it's because people used to steal in Africa. But I used to then eat stuff, and then I used to hide the wrappers. And there was one time where my parents were they'd taken me to doctors, they'd taken me to nutritionists, they'd taken me everywhere. And they were like, why is our daughter like rapidly gaining weight? Like, it could be diabetic. There could be a number of things going on. And as a parent, you're overly concerned about that. Sure. And me being me and binge eating and very shameful of it, lied, obviously, and would never ever say that I was eating like extensive amounts of food,
Sure.
And hiding it.
What made you want to lie in the first place?
Because I want to go on to this because emotional eating there are triggers to everything. And there have been studies that have been undertaken about sort of how a child potentially grows into emotional eating more than some others. And it has been proven that like emotional eating is a learned behavior in childhood, and mindful parenting in the sense of limited judgment, better emotional awareness, focus on like self-regulation has been shown to reduce the child's chance of emotional eating. Okay. But there are studies that obviously show that, on the opposite, that using food as a reward as such, when you're like, okay, well done, you've done this, you can have a piece of cake.
Once you've
eat
all your vegetables, then you can
have a
dessert.
Sweet or something like that. Or forcing your child to
effectively task to
eating.
Then gain a reward.
No, like for example, like when you sat down at the dinner table, and I very much appreciate, I'm not a parent myself, but I've dealt with a lot of parents in the sense of our jobs and coaching, and there is this thing that obviously you want to make sure your child's eating all of their food so they're getting the right nutrition in, even if they don't want to. And I can also appreciate children can be incredibly difficult, throw food on the floor, don't want to eat that, this is disgusting. But it's that thing of forcing a child to eat their food or finish all of what's on their plate has effectively shown that it's increased the reliance on food for comfort all the way through your life. So if it's a learned behavior in childhood and these things are coming up even in adulthood, it can be sometimes triggered by how a parent responded to a situation. Now, and this is obviously a consistent response to a situation. And as I've said in previous podcasts, I never came from a family that was overweight in any way, shape or form. If anything, the complete opposite. And I think that through the years, ingrained in people in my family has been a strong sense that fat and being overweight was not a vibe. Like it was a no-go. It was in fact, in some words, what people used to say, gross. And that potentially then onto a child can effectively cause the opposite of what I think you want it to cause, which is if you give somebody or potentially are incredibly restrictive on a child, or you tell them off for maybe overeating, or you tell them that food is, you can't have that and all that. These are things that children learn from a really, really young age. And I think emotional eating definitely doesn't just happen in childhood. It also happens the whole way through your life. And when an emotion arises, you deal with it as and when you need to. But I think, with recent studies with like behavioural change, there are strong links between that restrictive behaviour on children with food especially has been shown to worsen the relationship going forward in their life. So I don't know, like obviously as I said, like I used to very much be part of that, and I guess Mark, as we said, like on some extremes and different situations also was experience of certain things. But I think moving on to why we emotionally eat, barring the fact that obviously it's due to a circumstance. I mean, Mark, what do you want to say?
I would say that a lot of it comes from just trying to fulfill a void that you're currently feeling in your life. So you're trying to use food to obtain certain neurological changes, whether it's increasing or secreting dopamine and serotonin that you get from the feel good factor of eating food. Maybe you're lacking that in your day to day life due to numerous factors. And it's just trying to use food as a comforting blanket to elicit some form of neurological change in your body, whether it's long term or short
Oh,
term.
Jesus,
To
long
like,
and
yeah,
short.
yeah,
Today, you're okay.
couldn't get it out. Yeah, so
I
it
guess I guess also before eating does make us feel good. That's why it's one of
yeah.
the biggest
And
distractions.
everybody, we all do it every single day, every single one of us. So we all feel inclined to have our own interpretations. And like Georgia said, nature versus nurture comes into play, and your surrounding environment, your peers, your friends, your lifestyle, everything impacts that and
Yeah,
drives
like
an
your
internal
nutritional.
narrative towards um, the way you view food, the way you view yourself.
Yeah, and I mean,
Um,
like, as we've said before, like, having a sense of being full potentially or being satisfied with your food
mm,
can, it can allow for a feel, like, to feel, sort of like when you feel lonely potentially and you want to feel that, sort of fill the emptiness. It is that thing where food can sometimes be
mm.
that thing that fills the emptiness inside of you. And I think it's also important just to mention again that, like, you know we all enjoy the taste of good food. It gives us satisfaction, but giving that whole sort of tasty food, it can, as Mark just said, like activate the reward system in your brain. And if that action is repeated over time, which it would
Yeah,
be every day or every
think of it
week.
like Pavlov's dog, in the sense of
Who's Pavlov?
Pavlov's dog was a scientist who basically rang a bell every time he fed his dog, and his dog
Oh,
started salivating. So basically, he started ringing the
oh,
bell, and then
okay,
the
yeah, yeah.
dog was salivating prior to. It's like learned behavior. And it is very like Georgia said, reward based. If you do X, you'll get Y. If you do this, this is what will happen. And then we also correlate celebrations and positive and negative emotions tied into food, whether it's Thanksgiving or
Thanksgiving? What the
Christmas,
hell? You're not even
or
American.
we've got American listeners,
Yeah.
Georgia. You need to really keep up with the
It's
statistics
just
of
the fact you
our
said
podcast.
Thanksgiving is the biggest celebration when literally, have
Christmas,
you ever
Easter,
celebrated Thanksgiving? Uh,
numerous times.
Are you lying?
Yes, I
Yeah,
am.
you are
I
lying. There
am.
we go.
I am.
Yeah.
No, but that's obviously to shout out to
Yeah,
all
but
our
there is
American
one.
listeners.
Please just stop, Mark. There's not many American listeners. Um, but if you repeat that action of the sense of giving yourself reward system, you effectively can reduce the sensitivity to like dopamine, which then can trigger obviously a vicious cycle of it going round and round and round, and you not being able to break it. And I think that, look, there are a number of factors that something like a stressful situation can set you off on.
Mm.
And I think if we're talking hunger hormones and all of the things that, come with it,
Cortisol.
cortisol, obviously cortisol will increase rapidly, but then what effectively also is increasing is your hunger hormone. So your ghrelin levels, which can effectively diminish part of the brain's responsibility for impulsive action. So if you say, for example, are very, very stressed, and you're increasing ghrelin levels, which means then you're either hungry or your brain is not effectively functioning in the most optimal way, you then put yourself into the situation where you can be very impulsive in your behavior.
Mm.
I've definitely
And
seen
you
impulsive
just
action in my
eat,
behavior.
and like Georgia said, there's the increase in the speed of eating, so your internal regulator can't take register of the food volume and start to then
I think most of the time
what
we
is the word?
overeat on.
Realign your hunger hormones back to its normal level, where you stop to where that's when you feel like, oh, I've overdone it
But
with
also, there's
regards
that
to
big
food
link
volume.
with hunger hormones and sleep. Like if you're in a low mood or you're not feeling great and you or you're going through a really shit situation, that if your sleep is then off, then that will also, on top of, all of this going on, it will also affect your hunger hormones, which means it's easier to overeat in the day. So that could be also part of the cycle in which you go through, where you may potentially you're not sleeping well. This is then encouraging you to then.
It's just a cascading effect of it just knocks back into each other, thus compounding it, making it worse.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to say that, like, we were all in some way or another, maybe we've all got our vices,
Oh yeah, we will do.
And I think with emotional eating, and from all of the research and stuff and qualification we've done, it's really apparent that emotional eating is actually one of the safer options of abuse. Now, not to say that it's something we would actively encourage, but it is a very normal human response. But things like which could make and not be safe in your, in dealing with emotion, would be likes of alcohol,
Smoking,
drug
cigarettes.
Abuse, smoking. As I said, everyone's got their vices.
Yeah, so basically what you're trying to say is using emotional, but like you know what I'm trying to get at is emotional eating is an outlet, but so is other forms of self, not harm, regressive habits.
Well, yeah, but I think that in the sense of the overall situation, if you're going through a period now, you feel like you might have done, or potentially in the future months and years, you, like everybody, is going to go through some sort of life change at some degree, that you start to clock on to the fact that actually, if you are emotional eating, don't panic, first of all. Do you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, that's always going to make things worse. And actually, and as I said, is a form of, I think binge eating disorder can be an abuse on a body, but I think emotional eating is obviously, as I said, a direct link to emotion. But if you can see it like this, look, if you're not using alcohol to potentially sedate your feelings, or you're not taking recreational drugs, these are things that are linked directly to being incredibly unsafe,
bad for your health.
Well, we all know that drinking
in abusive like if you're drinking 8 tins a night and taking a handful of Xanax, then you should probably be.
Well, it's also the fact that, coming home and having a stressful day and immediately resorting to alcohol, or some people have a stressful week.
How many people do you know come home from a stressful day at work and think, oh, to relax, I need to have a glass of X?
Yeah, but that's like, we can say from a really judgmental standpoint, to be quite honest with you, the reason I don't drink is because I had a very rocky relationship with alcohol. Like as a young, I used to abuse alcohol to every extent because, as I said, I dealt with a number of different emotions and issues, and the same with drugs. So I sit in a position now where I don't take that stuff recreationally. I rarely drink. Like we have a couple of nights out, maybe literally a year, where we drink. And so I think it can come from quite a judgmental standpoint. Like we've all, as we said, got our own vices.
But I think a drink a day is not the end of the world.
No, I think it's when you're feeling sad and you resort consistently to sedating.
It's the thought of having to. The only way you can unwind or decompress or deal with your emotions is X.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes a bit of a sticky situation, because you're like, I cannot achieve this state of consciousness because I cannot have X. And it's like, well, if you've had a stressful day, you don't necessarily have to have a glass of wine or some whiskey. You can choose to do something else that gives you the same internal and external motivating factor outside of X.
Yeah, I mean, look, it'd be easier to say like, oh, instead of having a glass of wine and like a whole bottle in the evening, go to the gym. Like most people would be like, please just fuck off. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it is that thing of you're realizing you're in a cycle of destruction with that fueling yourself, and this is the same with food.
I don't think it necessarily has to be destruction either. It's just understanding that you're using something as an emotional crutch.
Why? Do you mean crux or crutch?
No,
'Cause
crutch, as in something that you lean on
I don't know, you just
emotionally.
like those words, don't
So
you?
you're like, I've come home from work, I can only get relaxed when I drink a beer. And if I can't drink a beer, then I'm not relaxed.
Yeah, and other people's vices might be scrolling on social media and diminishing their mental health
As
by
long
the
as you
second.
understand that's the situation that you're in, then you allow yourself to be, you obviously give yourself the opportunity to then carry on partaking, and you'll.
Yeah, I mean, look, like, you know, say you, and we're taking a stressful day at work in the grand scheme of things is not the most stressful thing you might
No.
go through in your life.
No.
For example, we have people that do actually message us on social media that are going through periods of grief and they feel like they've lost all control. And we just say, like, at the first and foremost is the fact that if you are on, say, for example, a weight loss journey or something like that, where these things need to be addressed, or you want to be conscious of what you're putting into your body and all of this stuff, like maybe at that time the focus shouldn't necessarily be on, you know, like expecting that you're going to be happy or expecting that things are all going to run. In fact, sometimes embracing it and being kind to yourself allows for you to have less judgment on the situation, because at the end of the day you are the one that's dealing with it. And I think there is this word that comes in, which is self-compassion, which is, you know, it is easier said than done, in my opinion. I think telling people to be kind to themselves is one of the hardest things.
Yeah, it is very
to
difficult,
do.
but it is as coaches and having to deal with the general population on a daily basis, that is our biggest job, is getting people to speak to themselves better and be nicer to themselves.
And I think, and we'll bring it back, you know, I just mentioned social media now, and I think, you know, I saw somebody on a podcast the other day saying, like, you know, why is it that we are like this now? And I can literally only put it down to the extent of use of seeing other people's lives and seeing other people's bodies and seeing how other people eat and breathe. It's just not normal. I know it's the way that life's going. I know that you're all probably scrolling on social media. We're there, present. We've got people, we're a business.
Yeah,
you
that's
know, like, and
because we have to be there every single day.
but at least we're trying to do something good, I guess, rather than being, you know, but you know, all of these things like what I eat in a day and all of this, it's really, really not useful for a lot of people because they just don't understand.
It starts to warp people's view on reality, and it leads to things like emotional eating and things like that, because people feel like they can't achieve certain things, or they feel lesser than other individuals, and then you're like, do you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna have a whole bag of Maltesers anyway. So
But I think, you know, as we said, like with stress, for example, I think there is one very important factor as to what can also be a trigger to emotionally eating, and that is restricting food groups or your intake in general to like an extreme
eating
amount.
a very low calorie diet.
So,
for
like,
example.
you know, you're more likely to react in stressful situations if you have restricted food groups and intake than those that don't restrict. So, because in the way that the human brain works and your body, it's an automatic response to, I guess, like food shortage or certain foods feeling special, or
your body, due to evolutionary biology, is predetermined to carry around a certain amount of body fat, and that obviously varies on genetics. But that is your stored energy for, like Georgia said, fasting periods. Like, we have been more primitive than we have been modern, in the sense of, like, we're not used to eating every single day and having unlimited amounts of food that are highly palatable. We're used to more like fasting or smaller meals on a less regular basis.
who's used to
The human race.
the human race?
The human race.
Back in the day, potentially.
Yeah, we're
Now
talking
it's-
hundreds of thousands, but where we've spent the vast majority of our existence in the evolutionary process. And it's just, and your body is going to want to fight the ability of you losing that stored energy, because you might be able to use it at a later date.
Yeah, like it's a body survival mechanism.
It's a survival mechanism. That's why I said, when you, for example, a competition, you're really pushing your body to places it literally does not want to go.
Yeah.
So
hence the use of
when you
potentially external.
get into those huge calorie deficits, and you or you have been in a large calorie deficit, or you have lost a lot of weight over a given period of time, there is always going to be some homeostatic response internally that is going to want to try and claw back some body fat to a certain degree. So
Mm.
this is when, like Georgia said, you can go for periods of restriction or cutting out certain food groups, and then the emotional eating of not being able to obtain certain standards, or being able to fulfill the requirements of a certain diet 24/7, 365 days a week. And then once you break the rules, then
Yeah.
you go off the
I mean,
beaten
like, if you
track.
looked at like science and like when you study like something like nutrition or you go into the depths of it, like the first, what kind of annoys me now, whenever somebody says to me, oh, I want to do a nutrition qualification or whatever, I actually pass them on to people that are, if anything, they're diplomas, they're not actually degrees or only
Yeah.
degree in any degree. Funny that. Because it's more suited to actually the people that you will be dealing with, either as a nutritionist or as a coach or, a PT if you want to learn more. And it's because we're taught technically as professionals that you need to be aiming for perfect, and until very recently, and I'm talking like plus or minus 5 years, so recently, I don't know if that's recent, but have courses or abilities to educate come about that are more actually adherable on a day-to-day basis for a client. And so whenever we used to get the most amount of hate on social media when we used to post foods that were seen in
As bad.
as bad. So what we mean by that is I'll never forget, we did an Instagram post on sustainable snacks, and it was listing including things that were, as you could call, healthy, nutritionally balanced. We included foods like a small ice cream, a packet of crisps, the chocolate Kit Kat, things that people are naturally going to reach for, and we have so much accessibility for these days.
Exactly.
And the amount of hate we got, it was literally like, can't be, you're not qualified.
Yeah.
How can you
How
even be
dare
telling
you?
people to eat sugar?
Yeah, how dare
And it's
you?
like, look at the
You're
world right
fueling the
now.
obesity pandemic by telling people they can drink
It's like,
0
what
calorie.
fuels the obesity pandemic is not having the right education that you can't manage your food. Like,
The vast majority of people, not to say that maybe if you're listening to this or not, like understand their metabolic process of calories in versus calories out. So, like it's just a guessing game of
yeah,
this
but I
is
think it's
bad,
the fact
that
that
is
we're
bad.
always being taught that you need to have X amount portions of fruit or veg a day, ideally 2 portions of oily fish. This is what the most of the general population go off, is what the NHS potentially provide, or potentially your national health provider wherever you are.
Yeah.
And as much as that's good, and you should always aim for a nutrient dense diet,
Yeah.
it is normal, and it's going to happen, and it will happen literally every day of your life where there's something potentially you intake something which you enjoy, which is highly palatable foods that are incredibly accessible.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's kind of wrong,
And like it's just life in general. Like what happens if you were meant to be eating a certain way and you went on a work retreat, or you had to go into the office, or insert any actual life scenario,
yeah,
and
work,
you're
drink,
unable
sorry,
to fulfill that and meet those obligations, then it starts to make you feel a certain
yeah,
way,
you
and
start
that
to
you
feel
can't.
guilty that you can't be completely on
Exactly.
plan, and why have I just eaten something? And if anything has more of a mental effect or a process, it is that. It is effectively demonizing the fact that we
And
should all
guilt.
be perfect.
And feeling guilty for eating certain things that, due to our, not our Georgian eyes, but the fitness industry is responsible for, whether it's a bland bodybuilder's diet, whether it's the incessant demand of clean eating, which is like zucchini noodles and random stuff like that.
Most
It's
people, why go and
we've
buy a
set such
spiralizer? It's just a spiralizer spiraling out of fucking
it's
depression.
just
I'm
nonsense.
joking though, it's actually quite nice. You just don't like courgette.
And
I'm
yeah,
like,
that's true.
did you say zucchini? Again, sorry, let me just translate for all of the British people. That's courgette. Why are you
Courgette.
saying American things?
I'm American, dog.
Please, honestly, that's no. No. Anyway, I think it's the whole thing of like, it's not just our industry. Like, you couldn't even necessarily.
Well, yeah, it's not even our industry, but it's other people that have no right in giving nutritional advice, also commenting on saying crazy things, making people feel certain ways about food
Yeah,
groups
and I
and
mean, like,
foods in
look, like,
general.
we've had enough of it. Like, we've literally had to. Do you know how much time we have probably spent? We don't get paid for this shit. Let's just start out this trying to send like research and conversing with people to try and educate them that that is not factually correct until you've
Yeah.
worked with a lot of people in their nutrition and their health, and you have huge amounts of experience, and you can back up what you're saying, and you have looked in and you have researched, you've done peer review, so all of this, and you understand it. Are you then entitled to then comment on it? And that does not include if it worked for you, because
Just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else.
so I think, this whole thing of being perfect the whole time, or, oh, you shouldn't have that, or, this is all things that actually make the situation so much worse. Because when somebody then goes out of control, and we get asked this probably every Monday when we do a Q&A after the weekend, that they've lost control, instead of being like, oh God, get back to your strict eating plan, whatever, it's just like, carry on, because that's the normal way of doing it. You carry on, people always say this, have fallen off the wagon.
Just be more mindful. It's certain studies were conducted with people eating in front of the television, for example, and they weren't mindful on the foods that they were eating and their portion sizes, and they ended up consuming more calories to somebody who's actually sat down, not watching television, and is paying more attention to their consumption. But we're constantly vacant in our consciousness, in the sense that we're always scrolling social media or working or tending to children, and we're not very mindful of our current emotional state, and with regards to the context of that state as well. Like, are you truly emotional, or are you bored? Are you hungry, or are you looking for something to do? Do you know what I mean?
I think it
It's
comes
getting to
down
the
to like distraction. Like, we're always going to want to. I was actually speaking with a client this morning about this, and we were talking just about just life in general, and that both of us were sort of seeking this sort of adventure to some degree, to like, because life in the past couple of years has been just really weird. It has.
Yeah, with
It's nothing that any
lockdowns
of us really have ever experienced in our whole lifetime, well, no matter what age you are. And I think, even though, like, forget the actual virus and what happened, like, it really did change routines for people. And sometimes we seek that distraction in our lives so that we don't actually have to deal with what's going on.
Yeah.
And that is, again, the same as like going and reaching to the cupboard and eating when you're stressed, or finding food and, and trying to effectively satisfy those needs.
Or like feeling down, or feeling like you are, what's the
Oh
thing
dear,
that we all
Mark.
very suffer from?
I don't know. You look at me
Not
like I know
suffering
what you're
from.
going to think. What I don't know,
You always
Mark.
finish my sentences.
No, I
Imposter
just
syndrome.
interrupt you.
Imposter syndrome.
Oh
When
God,
you're
that
just
word is so
feeling,
abused. Imposter syndrome.
when you're feeling down and you're feeling sad, and you're like, I need to pick me up, so I'm gonna have X.
But that isn't imposter syndrome.
No, but that's not. But that is dealing with something like that internal thing, where you don't feel good enough, or you feel like you could always be doing more, where you've got productivity anxiety, which is something our generation struggles from a lot of. You feeling the anxiety to constantly be productive.
Yeah, and I think that's also that sense of like,
And
what
you just get overwhelmed, and next thing you know, you're eating a whole thing of chocolate digestives.
Mark says that with confidence.
Oh, I love chocolate digestives so much.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of these things like where I think if you are endlessly scrolling on social media, like we'll say again, like that's also a distraction to your life. It should never be seen as a distraction. It should be seen as a break if you want to go on social media. And if anything, like, nobody, as we said again, is perfect in any way, shape or form. And what you see maybe on a nice glorified fucking structured Instagram or Twitter, or it's not factually correct, and nobody's going to show. I have got a little bit of thing against people that cry on social media.
I was about to say, I do get a little bit triggered with the people that use emotional eating or some form of emotional situation to be relatable, when it's like,
yeah, like I think
like
I'm not sure because I myself, as your when we record this podcast, we're actually going to go live this evening on our Instagram, and that's like the first time we've ever done it, because we've always just been so adamant we'll do it in writing, but here we are, we're going to actually put our faces to it. But I think it's one of those things where I would never set up a camera if in my darkest times, nobody knew. Let's just say that. Like, I was very good at masking it. The only thing that you could give away is that my face was constantly red because I was so anxious.
From both of our family backgrounds, what real mental health is like, and it's not taking a photograph of you crying
and expect it. But there's a lot of people that suddenly jump on that, and I feel like it's this thing where people are proud of it. Like, it's like, okay, you're going through an emotional state, you might have large vast followings potentially, where some of those people are going to be influenced with the way you're feeling, or the way you're feeling, you know, in general. And it isn't in our eyes, as Mark just said, you know, Mark has had extensive family things with mental health stuff that I don't think any family would ever want to deal with. And, you know, those things where, you know, a girl might whack up a fucking video of her crying, and then you're meant... It's
so
weird
because it's so hard for me to get on board with that.
I might be... I don't converse with these people that do it, but I think
obviously
that
don't have context, so I sound a bit heartless saying that. But
and if your whole job is all online, then maybe, I don't know, but I still think it's that thing where you can't expect that people won't be negatively impacted by that. That might set them off to think, oh God, you know what, she's right, do you know what I mean? I'm going to start crying. Maybe I've got that. Maybe that will go wrong. Maybe this will go wrong. And, you know, that sort of low mood brings low, you know, they always say manifest positive vibes. Like, sometimes it's hard to, like, you know, can't always be super positive. But I think that thing of seeking external...
There's like a weaponization of emotional eating and being relatable.
Where it actually crosses the barriers. So and as people that are qualified in behavioural change as such, you know, it's hard to see, because I know that that's, as I said, negatively impacting people that I either coach or I might, you know, deal with later on, or subconsciously people that might, you know, I know it negatively impacts people, because most people... You know, as much as people say, oh, I relate to this, or I'm like that, it's like, but why are you filming yourself crying? What made you think in your darkest moments that you would film it? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're listening to this. Maybe you're a really successful influencer. I don't know. I just
are in their darkest moments generally don't let anybody know.
Yeah, I can fucking well tell you that. I didn't. I literally was on medication. I was going to therapy.
You could have taken a photograph of you crying, and then people feel sorry for you, and then you get higher levels of engagement.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said, we have no context to these people's lives.
That's also
we're taking judgment of what we've seen. I don't think I've ever seen a man cry on Instagram, being honest with you.
No, I can't say I have either. Not to say that men shouldn't cry and show their emotions, you know.
Yeah, I know, Mark. You should all show your emotions. But I do think it's a bit weird reaching for a camera, because, as I just said, it's just like, doesn't feel like it's... I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it links up correctly.
And if you guys feel other way, please let us know. If you were like, no, you're being irrational.
I want to see somebody cry. Like, I need to experience what they're experiencing. I don't know. I just think it puts additional stress on it.
Think about yourself. Put yourself in that situation. Would you take a photograph of yourself crying and put it on the
I know, but internet? My point is what happens when, I don't know, like, somebody sees that, and if they not know you, because nobody knows you on social media at the end of the day. It's all just, a sort of...
It's all make-believe.
It's all... No, ours is not make-believe. Put fucking load of effort into that. Yeah. But, like, you know, in general, somebody's life really is the most perfect version of it. Yeah. And if you then go and put something up like, I'm crying or something like that, that could really look at somebody and go... You know, it could set their day off the wrong way, to be quite honest with you, and make you feel like you either want to do something or you feel like you need to help somebody. And that's additional stresses, which you might not even consciously be aware of, but subconsciously you are thinking about that. Yeah. You're thinking like, oh, that's a bit shit. Do you know what I mean? Or, oh, I wish I could help. Or these are stresses that we don't need as humans on top of our own. You know, since when, as I've always said, when do we need to know all of these things about everybody's life? We shouldn't. You know, there were things that are private. Now nothing's private. You know, literally nothing is private in your life. And so I think if you are going through a period of heavy emotion, you know, being with a professional, speaking with a professional, keep, you know, as I said, you're not keeping it to yourself. You could speak to family members, you could speak to friends, but posting online is that external
gratification from other people, because you're also searching for that dopamine fix of getting X amount
or
of
that
likes
this is
or
normal and it's
views, or,
okay to
oh my gosh babe, it's okay, and the inboxes and
it does stem from another thing. But I think going back to emotional eating, like if you're dealing through these phases of stress, grief, you know,
it's very normal to use food as comfort, because it's like we said, it's a very low hanging,
yeah, and I think, you
pun
know, the
intended, fruit.
best things you can really do is, as we've said, try and have as much self-compassion as you can for yourself. As I said, it's easier said than done. And, you know, without sort of the feelings of guilt and shame, you know, and then, you know, when you experience more self-compassion, you're less likely as such to reduce your food intake dramatically or try and counteract your behavior as such. Instead, you know, being kind to yourself,
be mindful, ask yourself certain internal narrative questions prior to consuming food, like, am I full? Do I need this? Is this really going to make me feel better? Or are there other habits or actions I can take that are going to help me feel better in the long run?
I do think as a human, it's good to be able to embrace your feelings. Sometimes we really avidly avoid it. Like I do sometimes. I just really try and avoid having to deal with like sometimes things going in your head. But like it is one of these things where one thing that will get you a little bit further in your emotional eating journey or understanding potentially your circumstances is the fact that like just understanding it is human experience, common human experience to go through this, and it can happen at any point in your life. It doesn't have to be, as we said, from a childhood to a teenager. You know, it could happen.
No, it happens
if you get divorced or something's gone wrong, you lose your job. There's you know, somebody's, as we said, passed away.
COVID in general, everything can have an impact. The people that you surround yourself with,
so your environment,
the people you follow on social media can have an impact.
Yeah, so just being mindful
everything
of
can
it.
have an impact. Like Georgia said, what time you go to bed, what time you wake up, or, you know, all these other self-care habits all have an impact on the way you feel physically and mentally.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's obviously seen as a very valid coping mechanism for most. You know, as we said, it's safer technically than alcohol abuse and recreational drugs. But, you know, it can be hard to manage, and also working out what that underlying factor really is. And it's not going to come in a week.
And,
you know?
Nobody can tell you that. You can't get reading it over a text message from some random person over social media. It's either you're going to have to go to a professional and talk about it, or you're going to have to actually sit down and self-diagnose and do a self-assessment on yourself.
Yeah, and as I
ask
said,
yourself some tough questions and be like, okay, well, why am I unhappy? Why do I feel unfulfilled? And these are really tough and sometimes quite eye-opening questions, but until you get to the root cause of what the problem is, you'll just be putting a bandage over a bullet wound. Yeah,
and I think, you know, obviously, as we said, having support of loved ones is always, you know, very, very good. And
what happens if your loved ones are the ones that are causing the
no, as I just said, but I'd like to say on the side of that, like, being brutally honest, I didn't want to talk to my loved ones. No, don't be so rude.
Jerry, I'm joking.
Jerry Springer. We're not in fucking America. Okay. It's Jeremy Kyle here. Sorry, and he was kicked off the TV because apparently he was... I mean, to be honest with you, the way he spoke to people was kind of unacceptable. Like, you're a piece of shit.
One of the lowest points, I think, for mankind was the paternity tests, when people would obviously start breakdancing when they realise they're not.
Paternity test, Mark. Yeah, that's what
you're not the father.
Yeah,
the guy's like, yeah, baby.
Yeah, that's everything that's wrong with men. Yeah. Anyway, fuck, men really annoy me. I don't think you've even got... Sometimes I think your brain is so wired differently to women's. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, of course. But
I know, but it's
what
just...
makes
it's
the world
just
go round.
No, men definitely don't make
No,
the
I
world
didn't say
go
men
round.
make the world go round, but if we all thought the same and were exactly identical, then there would be a bit
But
of
I
an
will
issue.
say that men can't live without women. Big statement. They
Yeah, I
can't.
mean,
I feel like sometimes
I
most
can't live
married men
without you,
seek
babe.
a mum. Do you know what I
I
mean?
can't. I can't live without you. That's for sure. Because I
Well, I
love
could
you
live
so
without
much.
you.
I know you can.
Joking. But that's a good thing
I would
because you
haunt you
shouldn't
though
be
if
like
I
one
was
form
a
of
ghost.
identity. I was shouting at you earlier. I was like, why are we always doing things together? Do you know
Yes,
what I mean?
because
We're married.
5 or 6 years ago, you cried and said that you wanted to do a business together. So here we are.
No, it's not about having to do business with you. It's just spend my whole life as an identity with you. Like, you realise that, like, when you are married or you're in a very in-depth relationship, sometimes just like, fuck, like, it's important to be still an individual, you know? I very much think that marriage, if you want to go down that route, is great. You've got somebody that should effectively complement your life. It shouldn't be your whole life,
Yeah,
you
but
know?
then you should branch out and
What? Have a
do.
threesome?
No,
God, that's so off-putting.
your mind is in the gutter these days.
Okay, let's start with what you did in the gym the other day to me.
George is accusing me of
No,
doing
don't. This is
very
absolute
sexual acts in the gym.
sexual acts. Don't
when
you
I
sound like a
was-
predator? No,
When
there was
I was
nothing.
all I was doing was cleaning the equipment, and I just so happened to gesture a certain hand gesture coincidentally when she was looking at me.
And that's even if it wasn't me. Fucking, I hope no. You sound like you just got you whipped your fucking pants off, and you were having God knows.
In that gym, who knows? I got kissed on the side of the face by some random.
I
dude.
had a head rub and a bum squeeze
little bum
conjoined at the
squeeze.
same time.
Yeah.
Obviously unwelcomed and should probably call the police.
Yeah,
But
the guy keeps on touching my arms. It's really, it's really off-putting.
anyway, I guess going back to emotional eating and Mark not making sexual
This
fucking
is why I
remarks
come
to
home
me.
and then I need to eat a packet of digestives because I've been sexually harassed at the gym.
No,
We're just joking.
No,
if
but,
like,
no, but
know
you
what I mean?
actually are being sexually
no, I am
harassed.
being
in terms
sexually
of-
harassed, but
If you were threatened by it, like, then obviously there should
I
be.
don't like it. I can just only imagine what a woman would feel like, and
Oh, it's fucking 40,000
it's really
times
sad.
worse.
It's really sad because a woman essentially is going to feel a lot more defenseless than a big giant man. in
Yeah, but like
general.
also like I saw a girl
And-
walking down the street the other day actually when we were coming probably back from the gym because it's
Yeah, that's the only place we go.
literally. And she looked like really beautiful as a girl, but she was just wearing a summer dress and some sandals and a bag, walking somewhere to the bus stop. And some guy's like, like, do you know what I mean? I'm like, mate, it's 8 a.m. in the fucking morning, you complete cretin. Stop it. She hasn't walked out the house because she's wearing that because for you to fucking say that. It's a hot summer's day. She's entitled to wear what the fuck she wants, and there is no need for your
Do you
remark.
think men would feel differently if women catcalled men? Do you know what I mean?
Well, like, you know what? Women have just got more common sense. You know, a lot of people just really do think with their penises, men. Like, it's like,
Yeah,
let's
they
get
do.
this rubbed the
They
right
do.
way,
They
and I'm
really
going to be
do.
happy.
They really do. We've been watching documentaries on TV about
Getting rich, well, for sex acts.
yeah. So Olivia Atwood's doing a multiple series documentary on basically things like OnlyFans and
It's
porn
called Getting
and-
Filthy Rich. It's like
yeah.
making a lot of money.
So basically,
from...
making money from doing nefarious.
It's
not
eye-opening. And Mark,
necessarily
no, but
nefarious,
Mark, did you not
it's-
say, you said, I'm actually embarrassed to be a man right now?
Yes, no, because like I just think about all the guys that are spending their hard-earned money
I don't give a
on,
shit.
on just really creepy things, and I feel like I need a platform to just have a word with these guys. And just,
I don't think you'll be able to get user
I just
3165 to actually
I just need to just speak some sense into like, you've worked hard, you've gone through, X, Y, and Z. Why are you spending thousands of pounds on making people
because
piss on
that's
each
their
other?
vice. That's not even the worst thing. You know what I thought was the best? And I'd never been aware of this. I was aware of obviously dominatrix stuff because
Oh, yes, this
that's
is
like
hilarious, yeah.
obviously like it's been around for years. Then you've obviously had stuff like 50 Shades of Grey and
Yeah.
like, I am an adult. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not like I'm for. but they've got something called financial dominatrix. And I think, and every female client I've discussed this with thinks it's a fantastic fucking idea. So what it is that you go on webcam. Now, you might have had to engage with a few bits of chit chat. You might need to wear a wig, and you might need to wear like
some sexy lingerie.
No, not even necessarily lingerie. Could be just something that looked maybe a bit meshy, like mesh lace or whatever. And then you tell a man, the whole thing with financial dominatrix is they want to drain their wallets and bank accounts so that they suffer and
they
the woman
essentially
profits.
Want to make themselves bankrupt, knowing that somebody's done that to them, and then they will live hardship like 2-minute noodles, sleeping on the floor type scenario, and give all of their money to a chick that makes them and just speaks to them like trash.
No, so this is what it was. It was like, hey, are you online? And then it was like, yeah, babe, I'm online. And then she's like, give me money. And it's like, £100 comes into her Monzo account. So you know this is not coming on credit cards. This is cash, okay?
Yeah.
So it's like £100 goes into the account. She's like, that's pathetic. Give me more. You think I'm worth £100? Ding, £200.
Should we role play one quickly?
Then she's like, get in your cage. I would love to tell a man to get in
the dude
their
was wearing a chastity cage round his waist.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. I'm going to be like, come on, bro.
I wonder if anybody listens to this that has
Come
weird
on,
fetishes.
bro. And if you do, like,
she managed to get in like 3 minutes. She managed to get like £900. Okay, and all she did was say, "You're a piece of shit." Yeah. And I think that people that do engage with weird things like that should be told they are pieces of shit.
That they should have an option. They can either phone in and do their sexual acts, or they can phone me. I'll talk them through an investment plan, putting some of that 900 quid into an index fund, or buying some commodities, or hell, if you want to go crazy, let's do some cryptocurrency. But let's not put a chastity belt on and get some chick to humiliate you.
Yeah, because Olivia Attwood, who I think is absolutely hilarious, probably because she's also a bit of a potty mouth. I always get referred to as a potty mouth, and I've actually tried to slightly not swear as much this podcast. But unfortunately, I see it as a form of intelligence, actually, and a way of expressing my emotions. Anyway, she decided that to like really go into it, that she would like set up an account, and there's this guy that was offering her £400. Is that a joke? £400. Okay, he developed a toilet seat that was like a toilet seat with wooden legs that he lies under the whole of the toilet seat whilst a girl shits in his mouth. And that's what he wants. But 400 quid, I'd demand 4 million.
The thing is, he'd probably be like an accountant or a dentist or some very respectable human being that is got so much power and say in certain things that he wants to be completely and utterly powerless and have some.
Yeah, but I was speaking to a client actually this morning. Funny that, back this morning, clearly trained a few people, who was saying that there was a person at their work that at the Christmas party was really quite human. Like everybody just thought, okay, he's good at his job, getting on with it. And the Christmas party, he dressed up as a woman, okay?
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, cool, maybe this is fancy dress. I'm not sure what you're vibing here. Yeah. And was so anti-woman that he went and took a poo on the women's bathroom in front of female colleagues, and he still works there. And he still works. Mad dog
them whilst they do it, stared at the in.
But everybody was just like, he's so quiet, he's so reserved. And I said, those are the worst ones.
Yeah, until you start drinking, and then
then the alcohol comes into play. But anyway, let's go back to emotional eating. Yeah. How do you help yourself through these situations? As we said, very individual, and working through your triggers, or not catching yourself out, but assessing your situations, and coming to the root cause of it is obviously the things that will take time. But as we said, having loved ones around you can obviously help. If those are causing things and they're not really loved ones, then obviously I don't in any way advise you to then speak to them,
if that's the case, then you just
But if you're feeling isolated, there's plenty of people.
Yeah, there are tons of you can turn to us. But if you're feeling if you haven't got the best supportive structure, then and you can't, let's say for example you've got no access to it, then it's a lone journey, regardless of whether you're doing it with or without somebody's help. You've still got to do the work yourself. You've got to put in the effort and undertake the self-care habits off your own back.
It's
it's
not self-care
ideal.
habits, in my
It's an
opinion.
it's an ideal situation to have support, but if you don't have support, then
I think you go
unfortunately
back to
you're just gonna
self-care
have
habits,
to.
but I think it also comes down to understanding your circumstances in general, and understanding it's
Yeah,
not always
that
about
self-assessment is very
going to the gym
important.
and eating a nutritionally balanced diet or anything. It's about working around what is causing you. And if it is just a period of your life, then you take it for what it is.
Yeah,
But
it's more mental than it is physical. So certain physical self-care habits will help alleviate that internal narrative, but all the work has to be done internally. So like when we help people with body transformations, the biggest thing for us is changing the internal narrative, how people view themselves, people's expectations, and how they talk to themselves is generally the hardest thing for people to accomplish. Going to the gym, picking up weights, putting them down, very simple. Nutrition, much harder in the sense of meal prep and macros and calories, but you can get your head around that. But the way that you view the world and the way your consciousness works is very
yeah, but
difficult
I think when it comes
to
to emotional
adjust.
eating and like with nutrition, I think actually instead of targets, because I'll say this again, your life does not run by a target. And sometimes it does infuriate me that you always bring it back to targets. So don't bring it back to targets, Mark.
Me, is that what I do?
You, yeah,
Sorry, yeah, I just
there's,
think so much. My brain is so coaching orientated that
yes, Mark,
I
but
see
it's about
everything.
being educated around your nutrition, which is a very large part of your life.
Yes,
Whether you're
okay,
eating out for dinner, whether you eat breakfast, it's
yeah,
literally your life,
yeah.
your
Like
nutrition.
we highlighted, understanding your metabolic outputs and other bits and
Not
pieces
even
generally
understanding that,
helps.
understanding that food, specifically, if you are educated with the knowledge behind it, will not be seen as good or bad. It's
Yes.
about with somebody with emotional eating, you do not address it by now stick to a target and stop your emotional
No,
eating.
no, no.
You address it
That's
by
very short-sighted.
education on
Exactly.
nutrition and
Yeah.
how it helps you before
Yeah.
you bring in any kind of target
No.
related thing, because
No.
that's again
Yeah,
subconsciously can set off
that's
triggers.
running before you can even crawl because you have to lay the foundation of any form of nutritional habit or training, and the first foundation to that is understanding, and with understanding comes education on.
Yeah, on and so I think one thing, as we said before, it all is going to take time,
Yeah.
and it's not a quick fix. These
No.
things can come about sporadically. They could come
Yeah.
about every day. If they're coming frequently every single day, then you probably can work through it a little bit easier as such, because you're really understanding your triggers.
Mm.
If you have got a stressful day at work and you've reached for a drink and then it doesn't really appear again, you
Mm.
don't really need to overthink emotional
Yeah.
eating as such. If it is happening on a repetitive basis and you are aware that you just don't have that level of mindset where you can control, or you're seeking stuff from
Yeah.
food,
Yeah,
then
and for just general fulfillment in general,
then obviously working with a professional is an option.
Mm.
But it's if you can do it on your own, then again it will always come down to you in general as to how you feel and how you behave in situations. But I do think that if you are feeling out of control, talking to somebody about certain positions in your life or current environments in your life will actually just help you find those triggers a lot easier
Yeah,
than trying to search
definitely.
them yourself.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, that was a little bit quick summary of emotional eating. I mean, at the end of the day, again, as we said, it's
Yeah, there's no real concrete answer. There's
yeah,
no like 2 + 2 = 4 because we're all so unique and have different life experiences. So, very generic things like which we're also very guilty of in the industry. Go for a walk, eat some fruit. That stuff is almost pointless in my opinion. It's
yeah, it's like
understanding
saying
what you
like
find value in, understanding what makes you feel better, understanding, like Georgia said, your triggers, and then doing that self-assessment and
yeah.
asking yourself really tough questions, and because that's the only way that you're going to be able to understand the root causes, and it's going to require you to travel a little bit outside of your comfort zone so that you can get some form of either understanding or some form of
I guess
clarity, or
yeah, okay. How many times do you want to say understanding in different words?
I could go on for an hour. How much time have you got?
We've probably already done that. Anyway, I think, as I said, if you're struggling with a period of life, you want some advice on it, always feel free to drop us a message, and we will definitely advise you on how best to go about your situation. And if it's out of our realms, we will always be able to advise on people that you can go speak to. But anyway, we hope you enjoyed that segment, understanding of emotional eating and financial dominatrix. Women, get the webcams out. Let's drain some male money. Anyway, we'll be back for episode 12 next week. And in the meantime, we will converse with you over social media.
Have a nice one, guys.
Have a nice one. Bye.